Banglatown, East Side Detroit, over by Hamtramck. Artist Chris Shank has a studio here. He's been working in the city for the past decade.
You can't blame a student for wanting to go to the West or East Coast seeking more opportunity. But I had spent 14 years in New York. I had a decent understanding of how the cosmopolitan city worked and a good grasp of art history. What I needed was time alone to grow.
Shank came to Michigan to the Cranbrook Academy of Art, which led to this. Works made from styrofoam, foil, and a team to make them.
The point of going to Cranbrook is develop your own point of view. That's the goal. Our allofoil process was something I invented at Cranbrook through just a series of rapid iterations. The best advice I got there from a colleague was just try a lot of things.
The art and design world knows Cranbrook's impact. You'll find it around here, the GM Tech Center in Warren, the spirit of Detroit downtown. 90 years on, the Cranbrook Academy's got an exhibition.
Cranbrook was a real incubator, and it was an attractor for people across the country.
Curator Andrew Blauvelt put the show together.
So With Eyes Opened is actually a phrase that Eliel Saarinen used in an unpublished manuscript that he wrote at the end of his life, reflecting on all the things that he had done at Cranbrook.
Finnish architect Eliel Saarinen designed the Bloomfield Hills campus, starting the academy in the early 1930s. A radical new approach, Blauvelt says.
Yes, it's radical in the sense that this was the first time that someone articulated that you should have a practicing artist be in charge of the program. Before that, it would have been a professor. And in the United States, there was a lot of what we call maybe art theory, like principles of art making.
So here, more doing than hearing people talk. Cranbrook recruited some leading artists like Carl Milles from Sweden. His figures surround the Orpheus Fountain. A fountain without a centerpiece, and here, the tiny model of what was supposed to go there.
It's part of the Cranbrook mythology that Saarinen, who was the master architect, thought that the figure was too big and too much, which I would personally agree with at that scale.
The full-size sculpture ended up in Stockholm, Sweden. Cranbrook's influence kept traveling far and wide. This painting by Hoya, who came here in the late 1950s.
He's considered a living treasure as an artist and has such an impactful career in bringing modernism to the Philippines.
Here's Wokyeon Choi from Korea.
Now she's considered one of the pivotal figures for helping introduce Western abstraction back into Korean culture.
Frank Okada, a Japanese-American from Seattle.
He helps introduce the idea of abstract expressionism into the Pacific Northwest.
Cranbrook art, you can also see it at the TCF Center. Alum Sonia Clark's Healing Memorial, a participatory tapestry for those lost to the pandemic.
Beaded Prayer is a packet or an amulet that has a message in the inside, it's sealed shut, and it has at least one bead on the outside.
Clark's work at the exhibition, a Confederate flag, threads meticulously extracted.
I think for Sonia, for the artist, it's definitely a question of social justice. And so her artwork is often dedicated to those projects where she's trying to advance those kinds of issues and causes.
Then there's design of the mid-century kind. Ruth Adler Schnee wanted to be an architect, off limits to women at the time, so she excelled at fabrics.
She was basically developing a new industry, so her, along with a few guys actually, and another woman, really developed the whole modern era of textile design.
Schnee and others like Florence Knoll of Knoll Furniture fame would help define modern interior design. Harry Bertoya, Cass Tech grad, he studied here, creating chairs from wire. At Cranbrook, Charles and Ray Eames learned to bend wood. With the war on, they made a leg splint into a work of art. Then came the chairs that permeated post-war America.
Thank you, Ray. All right, Charles, let's start with the first one right here.
The molded plywood chairs are a result of in a way, letting the mass production technique show through in the result.
The traditional, what we call the Cranbrook canon, has been the figures of like Charles and Ray Eames and Florence Knoll and Harry Bertoya, all of these figures from mid-century. And they all did really amazing things. But that's not the complete story.
Ken Isaacs led the school's design department in the 50s. In the 70s, he'd make his celebrated super chair when Watergate and an oil crisis were going on.
So he was one of the pioneers in what we call DIY furniture design or do-it-yourself furniture. So we think he's a really important figure that has been kind of forgotten about, but happily we have his archive now at Cranbrook. In 1984, somebody who also studied here at the Academy in the 1950s, Niels Diffrient, has a totally different other approach to his design. He is one of the fathers of ergonomics.
Niels Diffrient, another Cass Tech grad, his lounge chair created with the dawn of the personal computer. Later, he'd create his own line of fancy office chairs. Diffrient died in 2013, Isaacs in 2016. The next wave of designers carry on, but not so much with mass production in mind.
Jack Craig, who has this piece here. This is from his thesis project done here at Cranbrook. So again, experimenting with materials, not unlike the Eames experimenting with wood to bend it, he's experimenting with PVC pipe.
Every time I decide to make a table or a chair, I have to, chop it up like this. This will be a chair someday. I'm going to these giant plumbing supply places that only deal with municipalities and giant contractors, and I show up asking for one pipe. I was more into the idea of what you get through this natural process, but what you get out of it is very industrial design looking curvatures.
Jack Craig's work keeps evolving.
So slowly I cinch, the pipe around these irregular features.
He made an abandoned tool and die shop on Detroit's Lower East Side his studio after finishing at Cranbrook.
I was not really that introduced to the city during my time. I do wish there was a stronger relationship, and I hope that's changing.
Craig's connected to his neighborhood, like fellow alum Chris Shank.
I got to know my neighbors, and eventually my work required assistants. So my first assistants were my neighbors who lived adjacently across the street, and that's how I got to know my community. That's how I got to be a part of the community.
Shank's work, too, featured in the Cranbrook exhibition amongst all those other pieces.
The influence of Eames is strong. I mean, the ghosts are there. You feel the inspiration and the pressure. Cranbrook is a school of making, theory and practice, heavy on the practice.
That's fine.